Anchor of CNN, Christiane Amanpour.
Hi guys, nice to be here. Would you mind all taking your seats? Could we all take our seats? Yeah, let's all take our seats and we can start this powerhouse panel of women. We are the 50%. All right. And just one request, please, that you don't walk around during, because this is a beautiful set of cameras and angles, and we don't want these ladies obscured by people's heads. Right. I think we're ready. All right. May I please welcome Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, and Sanna Marin, Prime Minister of Finland. Welcome. Can I just start by putting it in context and asking a little bit of an atmospheric question? You both assumed office, were elected to your positions in December of 2019. Shortly thereafter, the world changed. We first had the COVID pandemic. Ursula von der Leyen, and both of you actually, did you ever imagine that you would be involved, and we're just talking about COVID now, in such a global upheaval when you first took the job?
Of course not. I had no clue what was coming up. Indeed, I came into office in December 2019. So I had 90 days, and then the WHO declared the COVID as a global pandemic with all the consequences behind it. I started my mandate with one big priority, and that is the European Green Deal and digitalization. In hindsight, it's still the big topic behind all these crises. But of course, then you have to deal with the pandemic, you have to deal with an atrocious Russian war in Ukraine. So we do not change the direction of travel, but the speed and the challenges, of course, I had no clue what was coming up.
And Prime Minister, you came into office also in December 2019, as the youngest Prime Minister in the world at the time.
Yes, I'm not sure, am I still the youngest Prime Minister? Sebastian Kurz was some part of this term a Prime Minister, and a bit younger than me, and actually I just visited Austria yesterday, and I can remember the good cooperation that we had. I must say that we didn't know what was happening 2020, 2021, 2022, and the world isn't a very pretty place when looking back and looking present, and also, unfortunately, looking to the future. The global pandemic hit, and it changed our security environment in many ways, and we had to make decisions that we thought that we could not do, but we had to do those. Then the war in Europe, energy crisis, and we are still in the midst of war. And in the future, we are still heading towards our biggest challenges: climate change, loss of biodiversity. And as Ursula said, we have to tackle these problems together. And if you may, Ursula, I want to give a little praise to you. I cannot imagine a better president for the EU Commission during these difficult times. Ursula has been a real power player, and it's been an honor to work with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you something? I'm going to jump off from the last intervention in the previous panel, which I suppose one can call Global South. And Ambassador, when he opened this conference, said one of the huge challenges, not just for the conference, but for the world and for policy, is to get a much wider public consensus around the world. You heard the Vice President of Colombia essentially questioning the direction of flow. And I just wonder whether you think that the inability to create equality and equity during the pandemic, that the Global South felt totally cut off, so they didn't get the vaccines in the same way that the rich North did. I wonder if you both look back at that, despite your efforts, and wonder whether that might have contributed, inter alia, to some of the lack of support you have around the world for your Ukraine policy.
I think, should I start, my dear? Yeah. I think it is important that we're very clear about what this Russian war is. It is about Putin's imperialistic plans. And this is something where all of us, and mainly the Global South, have a very clear idea. It is completely unacceptable. And countries on the other side of the Mediterranean have a bitter and long-standing experience. First, you send your negotiators in, then you they see that the experts are being sent in, and then it's the mercenaries that are being sent in. So what we have to do is not only explain that we will never ever accept this imperialistic war, we will never ever accept that Putin is trampling on the international law that protects all of us, that the UN Charter, that is also in the interest, it's in the interest of every single country, is being treated so disrespectful, and that we will never accept that today you can send tanks just across the border to invade a country. And this is something which my experience in the last 12 months needs a lot of just hard work, to work together with, as you said, the Global South, to make understood our point of view, but also to work with them on dealing with the knock-on effect of this atrocious war. This is the food crisis. This is the energy crisis. And that we do our utmost to deal with the knock-on effects in a way that the Global South does not suffer too much from Putin's war of aggression. This is our task. It's hard work, but it's absolutely worth it.
Prime Minister Marin, somebody as cult a hero around the world as President Lula of Brazil also doesn't believe in the intervention that you all have taken in NATO against, as you described, the illegal invasion of one country by a bigger country. So, as Commissioner von der Leyen says, we will never support this. We understand their historic issues. How do you see trying to convince others of the justness of your cause?
The war in Ukraine, it's not only an issue for Europe, it's an issue for the whole world. And that's because there's a war of values going on. Authoritarian countries are raising their heads. They are raising their heads against the international rule-based order. And this is a problem for everyone. When Russia attacked Ukraine, it violated all the rules, all the agreements it has itself been committed to before. And this is a problem for everyone, because then we will only see decades of this kind of behavior ahead of us if Ukraine doesn't win the war and if we don't stand behind our values and the international rule-based order. So I think this is a larger issue than just issue for Europe, just issue for Ukraine. And we have to do utmost to make sure that Ukraine will win and that we will preserve this system of rules that we have created together. And there was a reason why this was created. The wars before, world wars that we have seen, and it was devastating. And that's why we built a system where we can negotiate, where we can build peace, not use violence against each other, wars, attack another country to make a stand or gain something.
And to that end, when you came into office, as early as this time last year, you were saying that Finland would not want to join NATO. And then a month later was the invasion, and now obviously you're trying to join NATO. There is a little bit of a kerfuffle with Turkey deciding whether it's going to approve or not. We understood from the Secretary General of NATO that maybe now there will be separate tracks. Do you expect to join NATO separately, or are you committed to trying to join it together with Sweden?
When the war started 24th of February last year, and now we're heading towards very sad anniversary, 1 year anniversary of the war just next week, it was obvious that Finland will join NATO. It was obvious at the same day when Russia attacked Ukraine. The Finnish mindset, the most important thing for Finnish people is to make sure that we are independent, we are secure, we have a sovereign country, we can make our own decisions. This is the number one issue for Finnish people. And when Russia our neighbor attacked another neighbor, Ukraine, it was obvious that Finland will join NATO, because that's the line, that's the only line that Russia wouldn't cross. So it's to do with our security, it's to do with peace. It's an act of peace for Finland to join NATO. We have sent a very clear message. We want to join together with Sweden at the same time. It's not only because we are good neighbors and good partners. It's also to do with very concrete matters. The security planning of NATO in the whole north. It's in interest of us, but it's also in the interest of NATO that Finland and Sweden will join simultaneously. And we have sent very clear signal and very clear message to Turkey and also to Hungary that hasn't ratified yet, that we want to enter NATO together, and this is in the interest of everyone.
Mm-hmm. So no change then, even if some country wants to hold up?
Of course, we cannot influence and affect how some country would ratify. It's their decision. But our message is that we are willing to join, and we prefer and want to join together.
Mm-hmm. President von der Leyen, you remember very well, this time last year, there was warnings by the United States and the UK that Putin was planning an invasion. Your country, Germany, others, including the president of Ukraine who was sitting here, did not want to accept that that was a reality, and basically were trying to say, no, we hope negotiation can work. Anyway, it didn't. But even then, you were saying in your speech last year, and you used Ukraine as the cornerstone, you talked about Ukrainians as the new generation, young Ukrainians, of democrats around the world. Do you believe that this unity and steadfastness in the interim year will continue? Can you keep all your fractious members on board and people, 500 million people in the bloc?
Absolutely. I'm today more convinced than I was a year ago. But to set the record straight, indeed, our American friends, way more than a year ago, started to do something completely unprecedented, that they took their intelligence and knowledge and put it on the public market. This gave us an early warning. And my cabinet and the Commission started to work with the White House and with the Treasury already in December on potential sanctions in case that Russia would invade Ukraine. Indeed, we all hoped that it would never happen and we would never have to use these sanctions. But it was a tedious work day and night to align our very different trade systems, to develop sanctions that are targeted at advanced technologies and goods that are irreplaceable for Russia, and to be completely synchronized also within the G7. This made it possible that on day 2, day 4 and day 10 of the invasion, we were able to put on the table very heavy sanction packages. Mm-hmm. So there was the early warning of the United States was helpful, and there was work being done without which we would not have been so effective. A second point is indeed, for me, really touching, is the fact how Europeans, and I would say democracies, our friends, of course, and allies and partners, have immediately understood that this was serious and it is going to the core of our existence. Of course, we have many issues that we discuss. But here, from day one on, we were standing as one. We were united. We are united. And if you look back, I mean, through all the crises we have gone, including the energy crisis, and we have mastered it, today I can really say I'm deeply convinced that we will keep the unity and we will keep the determination, because it's about our values and our very existence we are fighting for.
Looking back 3 steps. First, when the war started, we were prepared, and the Commission was prepared, making the sanctions together with all our allies, and we were very fast of putting those sanctions on place. So we were prepared on that stage, that way. But looking back, now it was obvious that Russia will attack. We didn't want to believe it. We tried everything that we could to make a diplomatic solution, and that was, of course, the right effort to do, to trying to make a diplomatic solution. But looking back, it was obvious that Russia will attack Ukraine. They already used the energy leverage during that summer, during that autumn, they already used the energy leverage. There was different kind of disruptions with the energy flows during that year of 2021. They had put their troops in different places, saying that they are only training. Looking back now, it was obvious that they were planning this big attack against Ukraine. And then looking way back to 2014, when the Crimea was invaded, we made a big mistake then. We made a big mistake then together not to react more strongly. If we had acted and reacted more strongly towards the Crimea, then the war wouldn't happen. I think Russia thought that it would be just like Crimea, just entering Ukraine. Ukraine would give them open welcome. It would last only for a few weeks, and Putin would win very quickly and easily the war, because we didn't react in 2014. And now we have to learn some lessons on the current situation. And I think the main lesson is not to be naive. We cannot be naive. I listened to the previous panel, and I agree. I also want the world which is beautiful and good and secure, and we don't have to put money to our military forces, to our defense forces. I also want that world. But that world isn't a reality. The only way to secure peace, the only way to secure the international rule-based order is to make sure that Europe and democratic countries are strong, that we are investing in our defense capabilities, that we have that leverage, and that we have also that threat present, that these authoritarian countries, where Russia is a terrible example, that they don't use force, because they are also, and they have to think also twice, will they use the force and what will be the consequences?
Therefore, and this is the question, and we're trying to figure this out, what does winning look like to you all? You all have said very strongly what you've just said, Prime Minister. But what does winning look like? And in for a penny, in for a pound, surely. Surely you have to go to the very end, giving all the support that Ukraine needs to fight this war for them and for you. Are you worried? Ammunition production is not up and running like it should. There's some slowness, let's say, in between requesting weapons and getting there. I know you've done an incredible job, but we're talking about an offensive. We're talking about a war that yesterday Chancellor Scholz said could go on for years, while Zelensky, the president, is saying he wants it ended this year. Don't you have to double, redouble, treble down on your efforts to end this in a victory? What does a victory look like? Nobody's defined it.
Well, absolutely, we have to double down, and we have to continue the really massive support that is necessary, that this imperialistic plans of Putin will completely fail. This is one goal, and that Ukraine is able to win. And what the military support is concerned, indeed, I think it's now the time really to speed up the production and to scale up the production of standardized products that Ukraine needs desperately. For example, the standardized ammunition. It cannot be that we have to wait months and years till we are able to replenish or till we are able to deliver that to Ukraine. What I thought is that we now take the European Peace Facility. It is in place. It is there to typically fund that member states give military equipment to Ukraine. So it's an established body. It has a coordination mechanism with Ukraine, and that we convene the defense industry of Europe, and we very clearly ask them, what is it what you need to scale up and to speed up standardized products? I'm not speaking about the highly complex production of specific things, but the standardized products like 155 millimeters artillery, for example. So, and we need now to do the same that we've done during the pandemic. There too we've said, look to the pharmaceutical companies. Yeah. What is it what you need to scale up? We could think of, for example, advanced purchase agreements that gives the defense industry the possibility to invest in production lines now to be faster and to increase the amount they can deliver. And therefore it is for us paramount now to support Ukraine in these existential things. I think a second element we should not underestimate is the economic security of Ukraine. Ukraine needs to survive economically. And there, it's good that we now have decided to have a regular budget support for Ukraine, 1.5 billion per month by the European Union. Our American friends are matching that. And I think the international financial institutions should do more for that also. Okay. So it is the time to step up because Ukraine really needs the material to survive.
Well, what is a win for Ukraine? That's the Ukrainians to decide. Our only job is to provide all the help that they need. Military help, I fully agree with President von der Leyen that we need to scale up and speed up the production of ammunition and other military equipment very fastly, so that when we give our equipment, our artillery to Ukraine, then we can also replace that and not be vulnerable in the upcoming years. So I totally agree with that. So we have to, of course, give them military aid and also much more heavier weaponry that they have already received, and we have to send a clear message that we will continue this as long as it takes, as long as it's needed. They need financial help, they need humanitarian help, they need help rebuilding already the infrastructure. They are not waiting end of the war and then building Ukraine. They have to build it every day because Russia is attacking all the infrastructure very heavily. So we need to give them help, whatever they need, and it's their job to decide what are the terms that they could agree, what are the victory points that they need to receive. I think that Russia should leave Ukraine
and they think that too.
In every territory, but it's their decision.
Yeah. Okay. I think a very important headline is always for us, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Right. They have to decide what, for them, finally, is the point to sit down at the negotiation.
I mean, to be fair, they have laid it out in 10-point plans, 5-point plans.
Which is good and which we fully support.
I need to go to audience questions. Maybe some of these could be... And then I'm going to come back and ask you a final question. So this session is also entitled The EU More Than the Sum of Its Parts. Not exactly sure what that is, but if anybody wants to ask any questions, we've got about maybe 7 minutes for questions. The lady here? Yes, you. And please make it a question and not a speech, because we don't have time.
President von der Leyen, Natalie Tocci, President von der Leyen, back to the knock-on effects of the war, and in particular the energy crisis. Now, from a European standpoint, intra-European standpoint, we've done fantastically well over the last year. Looking at it globally, perhaps slightly less so, in the sense that the LNG hoarding that many of our countries have been doing have, in a sense, contributed to the energy crisis. Looking ahead to the next year, what is it that the EU could be doing more in order to address that global energy crisis?
Yeah. So, indeed, we should not forget how it started, the energy crisis. Of course, an over-dependency of the European Union on Russian fossil fuels, without any question. But then it was Putin who, within 8 months, cut 80% of the pipeline gas supply to the European Union. Big strategic mistake, big, because he thought he could blackmail us that we go down on our knees. The contrary is the case, because we've now completely diversified away from the Russian gas. Also thanks to the stepping up of our friends, the United States with LNG, Norway with more pipeline gas. But more important is even that it accelerated our work in the European Green Deal. So we heavily invested in renewable energy, which is homegrown, it gives us independence, and it's clean. We have doubled the additional deployment of renewables last year in the European Union, and last year, for the very first time, wind and solar delivered more electricity than gas did. What the other countries are concerned, because, and important is that we keep in mind that the tightness, the energy tightness of the global market is due to Russia's invasion in Ukraine. We should never forget that. But what indeed other countries are that suffer also from this energy crisis, what they are concerned, for us is important that our work together, for example, with the Global South, with Africa, is intensified on investment in infrastructure to have renewable energy. to produce, for example, green hydrogen. We're working now with the other side of the Mediterranean exactly on that one. So the big paradox of this conflict is if there's an accelerator for the European Green Deal and for global infrastructure in renewable energy, then it's Putin and with his atrocious war.
Yes?
Alex Sikorski, member of the European Parliament. My question is to the President of the Council, of the Commission, of course. We were lucky that the United States had Joe Biden as president when Putin invaded, and that they took the lead on helping Ukraine. But next time, they may be otherwise engaged in the Far East. Thank you for your leadership in using Europe's small defense budget for supplying Ukraine. But shouldn't that defense budget and Europe's military capability be much bigger in the future?
I think we have to invest more in defense without any question. But your insinuation that it might be possible that we cannot so much work together with our transatlantic friends. It was very reassuring. Yesterday I had a panel with Mitch McConnell, and it was good to hear that he was very clear about the commitment of the whole of the United States to support Ukraine and to fight side by side with us for the defense of our values, without any question. What our defense capabilities are concerned, of course it's sovereign decisions of the member states, but indeed we have progressed a lot in the European Union with harmonizing of the approach to the defense capabilities is concerned. It has very weird names, acronyms like PESCO, like CARD, you name it, but this is good. Thanks God we have it in place. We can build on that one. But yes, the emphasis has to be on a stronger defense posture.
Prime Minister Marin, do you think your country, your people, your policies, because it's you who have to do that, it's each country that has to decide, right? Are you ready? Because we heard that the peace dividend, we're out of that time now. Your defense budgets have to be ramped up.
Well, actually, Finland has always invested heavily on defense because we are a next-door neighbor to Russia. We are already using up to 2% of our budget to defense, and we will increase this even more so because we want to be prepared. And actually, when we look back to this war and the energy crisis that we are in, Finland already diversified our energy mix way before the war because we have aggressive neighbor, and we don't want that kind of dependencies that many other countries have had. I understand the logic, and it's very logical to build those very close economic connections and ties to try to make sure that the war wouldn't happen, because we have such a close ties. It would be so costly that we couldn't then see these kind of devastating things happening. But this wasn't the case because the authoritarian regimes, they think differently. And in the future, we have to be more prepared also when it comes, for example, new technologies. And I totally agree. I think the United States, they will look towards Asia even more so in the future. And we have to make sure that we are not dependent on those critical matters that we are too dependent now. During the pandemic, we were too dependent on medicine, we were too dependent on medical equipment. On the energy crisis, we are too dependent on Russian fossil fuels. Luckily and thankfully, we have done very much to get rid of those connections. But in the future, the big issue will be new technologies. Technologies, know-how, knowledge. So we have to also invest in our education system, the know-how, the knowledge base, and new technologies that we are not dependent on authoritarian countries from the East. Because there might be dark clouds also in that direction. And if we have those connections, if we are too dependent, then we are also we cannot be sure that we are secure in that perspective as well. So our job is to make sure that our citizens, our societies will cope whatever happens in the world. So we have to invest. European Union has to invest, and also member states has to invest more in these critical matters.
I would like to, before I go to the audience again, if I get some time, I need to ask you both a question about the 50%. This conference is meant to be, 50% women. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. You might have just seen, obviously, Jacinda Ardern, hugely popular Prime Minister of New Zealand, resign, citing she hasn't got any more energy in the tank. Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland, resigning. Inter alia, talking about how difficult it is, particularly as a woman, to lead any kind of normal life, as a global leader. I wonder what you both think about that, because you're the first female in this position. You were the first female defense minister in your country. You've experienced sexism. So just briefly, how do you deal with it? What do you think about their stepping down? And how do you encourage women? I know that's a lot, but maybe just a brief sum up, and then I'm going to ask you.
Well, first of all, I'm so happy that we live in countries where leaders change. That's a good thing.
Yeah. But Prime Minister, that's all good. But if I was targeting this to you, I would ask you, why did you have to apologize for being a human being? You were found dancing. Oh my goodness, how awful.
Yeah.
And you had to apologize for being a human being. Why?
And I have also danced after that, that one time. I think there's a lot to be done when it comes to gender equality. It's very important that we have people from different backgrounds, different genders, but also different backgrounds in decision-making places at the same table making the decisions, because then we have the perspective of everyone. Women are the 50% of the world, so women need to be 50% of the decision-making bodies. I know that Ursula and the Commission is preparing to set a bill for companies to have more women representatives on the boards of companies. I think this is a very important step forward. I think also in the political system we have to make sure that women have the possibilities to step up, to have their voices heard. There are a lot of structures within our political systems that actually prevent women to get those positions, to be heard. Many times it's enough that there's one woman. Look, we have these women here. No problem. We have women here, no problem. But we need more women, and we need really that 50% to make sure that everybody's voices are heard.
So, Commissioner, President, why then is it so difficult? Why do you have to tolerate so much backlash, misogyny, everyday sexism, all of that?
Well, because they are deep-rooted unconscious biases.
But do you think that would discourage or encourage more women?
Well, I can only encourage more women to be on stage, because that's where we belong, in the limelight. And women or men, the one or the others, are not better than the other, but we're different. And that's the point, that we have to, of course, take the share of the power to change this world and to improve this world. And I think for that, I know you've done a lot, we're doing a lot. You need leadership from the top. That is very important. Every man in a top position, every woman in a top position has to influence that there are more women growing up to the top. Of course, it's also a question of infrastructure. So I vividly remember my most difficult time were the first years as a minister with small children. And all these hidden prejudices. I got the question, in talks like these ones, have you already decided whether you want to be a bad mother or a bad minister? So there was this hidden prejudice. You cannot be either a good minister or a good mother if you are working on. We all know these prejudices. What we have to do is make sure that the infrastructure is there, that you have for young couples support with what is necessary in kindergarten, childcare and good schools. We have to make sure that till we have an equal distribution of men and women in positions of powers. I'm an advocate for a quota. That's the reason why we introduced a quota in Germany. That's the reason why we introduced a quota now on the European level. Because the time till women kind of grow naturally through the ranks is just too long. And therefore, still a lot is to do, but I can only recommend to women hang on there, because we need you, we need your voice, and it's absolutely important that you're there.
I must add, thank you, Ursula. I must add, because we are in the Mini Security Conference, I'm so proud that the former Finnish Minister for Defense went to a parental leave. So he did make that decision to went to a parental leave because they had a small child. So it's not only a job for mothers, it's also a job for fathers to take the time to spend it with your child, even though there's war in Europe, even though Finland is joining NATO. Our defense minister, Antti Kaikkonen, decided that his child is small only once, and he did take that parental leave. And I'm so happy that this is the equality in Finland.
One little anecdote, if I may.
Okay, they're making me rap, but hurry.
Oh, okay. I had decided to have a gender-based college in the Commission, and I have to ask member states to send me candidates. So I told him, you send me a man and a woman, that I can choose my commissioners for the college. You can't imagine the outcry on that one. There were member states who sent me 3 men to choose from. So in the very end, I have my gender-balanced college. So be stubborn and stay on the topic, then you will be successful.
Well, 2 great examples. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Prime Minister of Finland, Sanna Marin, thank you very much for joining. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Take care. I think so.
Ladies and gentlemen,